नमस्कार दर्शक मित्रों, थिंकलाइन के आज के नए संस्करण में आपका स्वागत है। हम लाइव जाने वाले थे, कोई टेक्निकल डिफिकल्टीज आ गई तो ये रिकॉर्ड करके आपके पास पहुंचा रहे हैं। 2-4 घंटे शायद डिले हो जाएंगे, मगर आज जिस विषय पे हम बात करने वाले हैं वो है टेम्परेचर राइजिंग इन एंड अराउंड भारत। और उसको ऐसे भी कहा जाता है जैसे डॉक्टर आदित्यन जी कहते हैं। आप जानते हैं डॉक्टर आदित्यन जी हमारे मेहमान हैं, आप देख रहे हैं उनको। काउंसिल ऑफ स्ट्रेटेजिक अफेयर्स के फाउंडर है, पेशे से डॉक्टर है, मगर जियो पॉलिटिक्स के मास्टर लोग हैं। इनसे बात करेंगे और मैं विषय ऐसे स्पर्श करने वाला हूं, एक के बाद एक सवाल पूछता जाऊंगा उनसे और हमें इनके जवाब चाहिए। वो कहते हैं ड्रैगन डैश द डिवाइन। अभी मेरे जहन में जो बात आ रही है वो ये आ रही है कि पिछले 15 दिनों में 2-3 ऐसी खबरें हमें मिली जिसकी ज्यादा चर्चा नहीं हुई मगर बातें बनी। एक तो भारत ने 10,000 ट्रूप्स डिप्लॉय कर दिया अपनी सीमा में चीन के साथ की। 3 दिन पहले एक खबर आई कि 30 साल में, इन 30 years, द हाईएस्ट डिप्लॉयमेंट इन इंडियन नेवी, 11 submarines and 35 warships are in the seas. There's an alert. कहे न कहे ये तो कुछ हो रहा है। क्या हो रहा है पता नहीं। जैसे डॉक्टर साहब बोल रहे हैं ड्रैगन डैश, क्या ये दिखाने का है कि भैया आप आ जाओ, हम तैयार हैं, वी आर रेडी फॉर दैट। दूसरी तरफ कुछ ऐसा हो रहा है कि डीप स्टेट के मोल जेल के अंदर बैठे हैं, बाहर निकलने के लिए भारत के अंदर छटपटा रहे हैं। आज अभी पता चल जाएगा, ये मीटिंग चालू होगी, हम रिकॉर्ड कर रहे होंगे और उनको कितने दिन का और रिमांड मिला वो भी पता चल जाएगा। मगर उससे भी ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट बात, उनके लिए जर्मनी बोलता है, यूएस बोलता है और दोनों को भारत भगा देता है, स्ट्रांगली भगा देता है। मगर दोबारा फिर से यूएस आज सुबह बोलता है कि हमें हक है। तो क्या 7 मिलियन इलीगल्स जो यूएस में आए उसके बारे में हम बोले? क्या नरेंद्र मोदी सरकार डोनाल्ड ट्रंप को अप्रूव करना चालू कर दे यूएस में? उनको कैसा लगेगा? मगर शायद लगता ऐसा है कि ये कोलोनियल माइंडसेट है, एक माइंडसेट ऐसा बना हुआ है, हम कहे वो सही, आपको हमारी बात सुननी पड़ेगी। लोगों को शायद रेसिज्म भी लगे, मगर इनको क्या पता है। डॉक्टर साहब, यू टेक द फ्लोर एंड टॉक एंड आई इन बिटवीन बटन।
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Bhatt, for inviting me on Thinkline platform. I would rather keep the topic of discussion very narrow and confined. Otherwise, we have very limited amount of time, and if we bring domestic issues and problems with Germany and US into this discussion, we won't have time.
Okay.
So let's confine to what is happening on the northern border and in Indian Ocean, and what is the threat, what is the theatrics we are perceiving. And it is very important when I say the dragon dares the divine. There is a competition going on. You have the hyperpower, and then you have a rising hegemon. Rising hegemon wants to consolidate its power so that there's no number 3. And as India is resurgent, rising, the rising hegemon, which is the dragon, is trying to contain India in every possible way. Because they cannot challenge the reigning hyperpower. till they contain India. They cannot acquire the island of Taiwan if India is actively asserting herself. So this is a warning shot being fired against India. And I think policy planners in India have now learned from the history. So they are also making preparations for a welcome. 10,000 soldiers being sent from western border of India to northern border along Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh is to bolster the capacity and capability in case of an adventurous step by the dragon from the northern land border. Why it is important? Because the confluence of events that you have mentioned, also the fact that election process has started. And anyone who knows the general election process in India is kind of going to linger on for 3 months. In their mind, the government would be preoccupied. So the government of the day is taking all possible preventive steps. Mind you, anytime China has attacked India, it is at time of crisis. Look at 1962, Bay of Pigs operation, Cuban Missile Crisis, in which Soviet Union and United States, the two superpowers, were confronting a nuclear exchange. China utilized that crisis moment, and knowing very well that Mr. Nehru was declining in health and in his prestige politically, so the time was chosen. In 2020, the Galwan conflict, India was under Wuhan virus epidemic. There was a global crisis going on. They attacked at that time. They always time their adventurism with national and international event. And if I may remind, in 2014, Chinese troops entered India when Xi Jinping was in Gujarat, hoping that India will just lump it down, the insult. So that is there, but there are other things happening. As I said, that Indian side is much more assertive now, and they are doing other things. So land border is one thing. There was something else on the land border. The inauguration of the Sela Tunnel in Arunachal Pradesh, in which Prime Minister went and inaugurated. This is a strategic tunnel that provides all-weather connectivity in Arunachal Pradesh, specifically in Tawang district. China issued a statement saying that it's not acceptable, and India said that forget about it, it's our territory, we will do whatever we are doing. Other thing you may not have realized, that between March 11th and March 16th, a notum was issued, and India did a test of MIRV, Agni 5 MIRV. And China gave a statement that we don't want to enter into an armed conflict, an armed war, competitive armed war with India, but the message is being given. Third thing which you will see at the same time, Dr. S. Jaishankar visited Philippines, stood on podium along with Filipino foreign minister and strongly supported protecting Philippines' sovereignty. And again, China reacted to that third parties have no business to poke their nose into South China Sea conflicts. And India should respect Chinese sovereignty in South China Sea. Number 4, China's dalliance with Muizzu in Maldives, that is having some frayed ends. China provided 1,500 tons of fresh water from frozen glaciers of Tibet to Maldives because it is water starved. In 2014, India provided fresh water to Maldives. Now there's no way Maldives can ask India for fresh water.
But they asked
Apparently,
for help again, sir.
pardon?
Moitsu has asked for help again.
Yes, and this is what I'm saying. Why Moise is asking for help? There can be two things. One, Prime Minister visited Bhutan and gave a grant of 10,000 crores of rupees over 5 years. Bhutan is the topmost nation that gets bilateral assistance from India, followed by Maldives. Maldives wants to be in the same category as Bhutan for Indian assistance. That is number one. Why he is asking for restructuring of debt? Because China refused to restructure the debt of Maldives. So now they are getting the real Chinese mercantile attitude, because if they restructure the debt for Maldives, China will have to restructure the debts for all the BRI countries that are heavily under Chinese debt. So I think there is some realization coming in Maldives, but Maldives is still actually hosting Chinese spy ships. There are 3 Chinese spy ships in Indian Ocean. Actually, there are 4 now. The 4th one just came back because India issued another notum, actually 2 notums. The first notum is for March 29th, March 30th in Andaman Nicobar Island area, where there will be some live exercises. And the second notum, and for our viewers, notum stands for Notice to the Air Missions. The second notum is issued for 1,600 kilometer range in our testing site in Bay of Bengal. And I think it will be for test of Agni Prime ballistic missile. So you see what is happening there. Also, at this point in time, like you said, that India has 11 conventional submarines in Indian Ocean region. India has deployed 35 warships of Indian Navy. No, remarkably, 10 of them or 12 of them are in the Red Sea area, dealing with piracy issues and Houthi attacks and stuff like that, in protecting the merchant marine vessels, commercial. But also, Indian naval assets are being activated to counter the Chinese spy ships. And Chinese spy ships are there to monitor India's ballistic missile tests.
Yes.
So there is a Chinese spy ship called Yuan Wang 03. This spy ship has the ability to track satellites and ballistic missiles. And it is entering Indian Ocean region, and it will be 4th Chinese spy ship. China has already deployed 3 other spy ships, which are named Xiangyang Hong 1 and Xianyang Hong 2. These are so-called oceanographic survey and research ships.
Yes.
Along with Dayang Hao, a marine resource survey vessel. These ships had entered Indian Ocean region in the wake of India issuing a notum in mid-March. So as the fresh notum was issued, and it's a 1,600 kilometers notum, the 4th Chinese spy ship is re-entering back. So we would not allow China to unilaterally continue to spy on Indian military activities. So both sides are now prepared, because if China takes an adventurous step whether that is on the Indo-Tibetan land border or in Indian Ocean region, because Chinese activities are geared towards containing India, and eventually their goal is for India to break down in smaller states. China is not engaging India as a friendly nation. So all the policymakers must disabuse themselves of the notion that China is a friendly country or it is a peer competitor. No, it's not a peer competitor, it is an adversary.
China is an adversary, sir, what you said. Let me put a question here.
Sure, go ahead.
It's said that, generally Chinese have a window in a year, March to October, as far as any type of misadventure is concerned on the land. That is the window which is open for Chinese to do that, because after that, the terrain becomes literally impossible. In Galwan, what happened, we know. They were beaten back, and they were beaten black and white, badly. They do not confess it. That's a different issue altogether. But they were beaten back. Now, you are talking about MERV 2 technology. They do not want to get engaged in it, but this tactical superiority that Bharat has attained by doing that, how far does it go from stopping China to create any sort of misadventure? Because it's always said in the world of geopolitics, that China looks at one way, makes a gestures at one side, and hits somewhere else. So are we looking at China preparing an attack to Taiwan and then making all these notions against India? Or vice
So,
versa?
in one of the articles, I did mention about art of deception.
Yes.
That was a piece that was more than a decade ago, published on the Clause website. Clause is a defense website run by Ministry of Defense. Art of deception, that is what they practice. They will say something and do something. So you can never rely on Chinese word. That is one thing. By testing the MERV capability, we do not have strategic superiority over China. We have strategic equality, because China already has that capability.
Now, that's something like they can't do anything about that, what I meant.
So we have also acquired that capability. And I think that would be raising their temperature. They would be feverish that if we can do a second strike capability with confidence, so that is troubling them. And if you know that in the Chinese Communist Party NPC, National Parliament meeting, very recently in February, they removed all mentions of peaceful reunification with Taiwan. So the implications are that reunification would be there, occupation of Taiwan would be there, it is going to be there by force. And it is Xi Jinping's mission that during his lifetime, the reunification happens. And the guess is that they will do it before 2027. And in order to achieve that, they need to, quote unquote, neutralize India's threat. So they are trying to basically give pin pricks here and there and threatening, having like dragon breathing the fire so that India is cowed down. That is what their philosophy is at this point in time. I may also tell you that you said Galwan, they were beaten back, but they also tried to enter Indian land in November of 2022 on 2 separate occasions. China also has history of doing things between 1962 and 2020. There were 3 incidents, one in 1967 at Nathula, when they were beaten very badly.
Badly, yes.
In 1987, when General Sundarji was the chief of the army staff, again they got a bloody nose. And then in Doklam crisis of 2017, when India announced to the world that we take our treaty obligations very seriously in this situation, treaty obligations with Bhutan, that there was a standoff for 73 days. And then the recent message again has gone that we are guarding our flank with Bhutan. The successful visit of the Prime Minister. Why it was that Prime Minister during election campaign decided to go to Bhutan?
Yes.
Because there is some apprehension that during the long election season, when we have our domestic problems that you mentioned very well, India would be distracted. There will not be any functional central government. So something could be done. So all these measures will give a warning to the dragon to hold back your fire, otherwise your fire will consume yourself.
But sir, let me ask you a pertinent question.
Hmm.
On one side, China keeps on poking its nose with CPC and other things in Pakistan.
Hmm.
Now we are hearing from that western neighborhood, we've been hearing news of repeatedly Pakistani army and Chinese nationals being killed there with the bloody nose on one
Hmm.
side.
Hmm.
On the other side, we are having a real eye-to-eyeball contact standoff with them on this side. What are we seeing? Are we seeing a Sino-Wahhabi leftist? When I say Wahhabi leftist, it means basically the Pakistanis, what we are talking. We are not talking of West Asian Wahhabis. Are we seeing the two-prong squeezing strategy being applied here?
Well, for all practical purposes, Pakistan de facto is China's economic colony. Pakistan is no longer independent nation. The PLA troops have been stationed initially in POK and now all over the CPAC and in Balochistan. An insurgency is going on. A domestic insurgency is going in occupied Balochistan. 5 Chinese engineers were killed very recently.
Yes.
And in fact, for the first time, China had to remonstrate with Pakistani army and ISI and GHQ about Chinese engineers being killed. And this is not the first time. There was a time when 9 Chinese engineers and workers were killed. And it is leading to a situation that Chinese are fleeing the Balochistan and Gwadar area because of the ongoing insurgency. That's a separate issue that is going on. But China will always try to use the second front because they are, in fact, the economic colonial masters of Pakistan. So they will use anything like that, but I think they are getting bloody nose from the Baluch insurgents in Gwadar and other areas of Balochistan, and that situation is not going to change because it is asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics that are being used by BLA and other armed insurgent groups in Balochistan. So again, coming back to China, it is China's stated intention to reoccupy Taiwan. For that process, they will continue to needle India and try to threaten India. But India is also giving subtle messages at this point in time. What rankled Chinese very much was India standing with Philippines shoulder to shoulder, saying to the world that sovereignty of Philippines is very important. And if you look at the conflict, China has conflict with a number of nations, ASEAN nations, in the contested area over various islands. And with Philippines in the West Philippine Sea, with the Scarborough Shoal and Reef, with Vietnam in South Champa Sea, over Paracels Islands, with Indonesia in North Natuna Sea. So we have to change the terminology also. It's not South China Sea. The sea lanes, the sea areas, the maritime areas that are contiguous to the littoral states, they need to be identified by those nations. So the conflict with Philippines is in the West Philippine Sea. And China has been using bullying tactics by, throwing water cannons at Filipino ships. and ramming Filipino ships with their own coast guard, huge coast guard vessels. Coast guard vessels are not supposed to fight.
Yes.
So they go around by sending huge coast guard ships that ram against the Filipino naval assets. So China is trying to browbeat India by saying that India must respect Chinese sovereignty in South China Sea. Well, South China Sea does not belong to China.
Yeah.
It belongs to other littoral nations of ASEAN, and India has every right to be there, have freedom of navigation operations. In fact, our posture should be much harder. I would suggest that India needs to plan 6 aircraft carrier formations for 2035 to 2040 period, when China will have 6 aircraft carrier formations. Usually when you have so many carrier formations, one of them is always on the dock for retrofitting, so you have only 5. But India must have a permanent, actually, aircraft carrier formation in the so-called South China Sea region, because we are sitting next door in Andaman and Nicobar Island, where we have a tri-service command. And people can say that you have a stationary aircraft carrier, but no, it is stationary. What you need is a navigable aircraft carrier formation with power projection in that region. The other thing is that we have asymmetry in terms of nuclear powered submarines.
Yes.
As we discussed, that 11 conventionally powered out of 16 India-owned conventional powered submarines are there in Indian Ocean region, but China deploys nuclear powered submarines, and they have superiority in number and technology. India has only Chakra class, kind of Soviet design, and there are 3 or 4 nuclear powered submarines. I think there are 3, and the 4th one is
Being built.
being built. So we need to actually rectify these imbalances and asymmetries. It should not be a question of whether we need to fund nuclear power submarines or aircraft carrier formations. We need to fund both. And yes, domestic resources, financials can be found out. It will generate employment for so many thousands of workers. We need to double the capacity by having double shifts done or 3 shifts done, 3 8-hour shifts for workers, so that they keep on working in the docks, because these vessels take time to, and we need to create alternative manufacturing capabilities in our domestic Atmanirbhar program, so that we provide not only employment to workers, we give a boost to domestic economy, domestic manufacture, simultaneously safeguarding our strategic interests. So it's not a question of either or. And it is also not a question of Navy versus Army or Navy versus Air Force resource allocation. There has never been a superpower that does not have a blue water navy. Time has come for India to develop a true blue water navy with power projection in entire Indo-Pacific maritime region, which is our area of interest. Our core interests lie in Indo-Pacific.
Now, my last question to you for today. Hypothetically speaking, when do you see this misadventure of Chinese coming? Let's say before 2030 or 2027. And in such a scenario, today, the bonhomie of India with Russia is something else. Similarly, Russia and Chinese relations are something else. Where do you think Russians will go?
Repeat the last sentence.
Where do you think Russians will go?
Well, Russians will go where Russian national interests are. In 1962, you know what they said? You are our friends, they are our brothers. But situation is not analogous to 1962
Yes.
on 3 different fronts. India of 2024 is not India of 1962, that is one. Russia of 2024 is not the Soviet Union of
1962.
1962. And China also is not the same. So situation has dramatically changed. I think, yes, the relationship between Russia and China has been strengthened by US stupidity and follies, strategic follies. But deep down, Russians are very scared of Chinese embrace. They know that they have de facto become junior partners of China, and they don't like that. And they would like to reverse that situation as soon as possible. They are under constant threat that China will take over the Russian northeast region and especially the port city of Vladivostok. So China is doing Sinification or Sinicization of Russian Far East, and Russia is scared of that. So it's in Russia's interest to maintain equidistance, if not come out in India's side, because we still get almost 45% of our armed and ammunition from Russia.
Russians, yes.
From Russia. So that would have implications, and considering the support we extended to Russia currently in their problems in Ukraine and multilateral sanctions from Western nations, Russia would be wise enough to not support China in a future possible conflict. As to when Chinese misadventure will happen, I can tell you that there may not be a full-scale misadventure against India. It will be strategy of salami slicing and thousands of pinpricks, because they know that they cannot enter into an open war with India. India is capable of dealing with them in an open war. They have not fought an open war since 1979, when they had a war with Vietnam, and they lost that war. Their army, the PLA and whatever their forces are, not battle hardened. Having said that, my guess is that there will be attempt to retake Taiwan either in 2027 or 2028. Why in 2027? Because of certain emotional significance. It will be 100-year anniversary of PLA and Chinese Communist Party. That is number one. Second would be United States at that time would again be involved in a presidential election of 2028.
Yes.
Forerunner. Chinese always try to look for strategic timing when the major powers are distracted. And even if it is, let's say, second term of Biden, if he is still there, or part-time administration of Kamala Harris, or for that matter, Donald Trump, both these administrations would be led by geriatric, half-demented leaderships. And there would be new candidates coming, so it will be a brutal battle because of two-term limits. Neither Biden nor Trump, either of them, if they are there, they cannot contest again unless Constitution is subverted. So from both sides, Democrat side and Republican side, there will be new candidates, new faces, and it will be free for all at that point in time. And believe it or not, US presidential elections have become very, very dirty, far dirtier than Indian elections. So China will use that opportunity when US is distracted. So they are biding the time. They are building up strength. They are learning from the Russian mistakes in Ukraine. Russia was not adequately prepared. Russia was very complacent that with 135,000 soldiers, they could subdue entire Ukraine. So Xi Jinping is learning from strategic follies of Russia and building up strength. But meanwhile, in next 3 years, they want to contain Indian threat.
They want to contain Indian threat. दर्शक मित्रों, आपने बड़ा स्पष्ट तरीके से सुना. What are we talking about and why is it that just before the elections, भारत के 10,000 ट्रूप वेस्टर्न से नॉर्दर्न बॉर्डर पे जाते हैं, आई बॉल टू आई बॉल कॉन्टेक्ट हो रहा है, और भारत की नेवी के 11 सबमरीन और 35 युद्धपोत जिसे कहते हैं, वो भी अरेबियन सी के अंदर काम पे लगे. दर्शक मित्रों, चाइनीज एडवेंचर और मिस एडवेंचर, वॉट एवर यू कॉल इट, विल बी डेल्ट विथ वेरी हैवीली. अभी तक जो आपने देखा है, टिल नाउ व्हाट यू हैव सीन, गलवान हुआ या नाथुला हुआ, दे वर वेरी वेरी स्मॉल वंस. वहां तो हाथों से मार पड़े थे, थप्पड़ पड़े थे, लप्पड़ पड़े थे, अगर अपनी भाषा में कहूं तो. मगर अब जो होगा ना, वो ऐसा सबक सिखाया जाएगा कि दे विल नॉट गेट अप अगेन, बिकॉज हियर द भारत ऑफ 2024 इज वेरी वेरी डिफरेंट. रेस्ट अश्योर्ड, बी रेस्ट अश्योर्ड विद दैट. ये 1962 वाला भारत नहीं है जहां पर चीनी सैनिकों के लिए आप चावल बनाते थे, चावल बेचते. ये भारत नहीं है. इतने में आप समझ जाइए, डॉक्टर आदित्य जी ने तो बहुत सी बातें कर दी, एंड ट्रू एट दैट, but the geopolitical scenario is going to change. Why is it that we keep talking about Malacca Strait, the choke-up of Malacca? Why is it that we always keep on talking India has to be the protector of Indo-Pacific? Things are getting clear, but still we have to be very, very cautious. मित्रों, जाने से पहले डॉक्टर आदित्य जी का मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करूंगा. I'll thank him a lot for giving this insight, and I'll give him a minute to finish the whole thing. But before that, let me tell you, please, दोस्तों, हम आपकी दुआ से अब ये स्टेज पे पहुंच गए हैं जहां पर हम लाइव जा सकते हैं. आज टेक्निकल तकलीफ हो गई, नहीं जा पाए, बट आपसे निवेदन है कि प्लीज लाइक, शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब. मैं आपसे सिर्फ एक ही निवेदन कर सकता हूं, मैं और कुछ नहीं मांगता. योर लाइक, योर सब्सक्रिप्शन इज वेरी मच नेसेसरी. प्लीज डू दैट. और नीचे डिस्क्रिप्शन में आपको डिटेल्स भी मिल जाएंगे इफ यू वांट टू हेल्प इन एनी अदर वे. डॉक्टर साहब, वन लास्ट वर्ड ऑफ अ मिनट.
The last word is quoting from a famous Spanish American philosopher, thinker, and academic, George Santayana, or if I go for his Spanish name, because he remained Spanish citizen despite being an American, Jorge Santayana. Those who fail to learn from the lessons of history are condemned to repeat it. Indian policy planners have to learn from the lessons of history. China is not a friendly nation. The first Indo-China war, you know when it happened? 649 AD, when a representative of Tang dynasty, Wang Xuans, came to India as an ambassador of China, Tang dynasty, whatever the emperor's name was, because King Harsha had sent an ambassador to China. But by the time this ambassador came to India, King Harsha had died. So the new king had a skirmish with this particular ambassador slash military general. He was expelled from India. He came back with 7,000 Nepalese infantrymen and 1,200 Tibetan infantrymen, defeated this pretender to Magadha's throne, captured him, took him back to China. So learn from the lessons of history. Don't say that there was bonhomie between India and China before 1962. Learn from the lessons of history.
भैया, इतिहास से बहुत कुछ सीखने को होता है, और यही बात अभी डॉक्टर साहब ने कही. जाते जाते आपको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद डॉक्टर साहब. वेरी मच obliged that you gave such a big insight to me. मित्रों, आपसे भी निवेदन है, फिर से लाइक, शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब. फिर मिलेंगे एक नए एपिसोड के साथ, होपफुली विद द लाइव। तब तक जय हिंद, जय भारत, जय श्री राम।
धन्यवाद।